Welcome back to Truck Tech, everyone. It's good to see you. We're back here at home in Nunavut, Michigan this week after 3 episodes out on the road in Cleveland and Boston and before that in Detroit. And so we're back where we belong, I guess. The idea this week is that even though it's a bit of a quirk of schedule, we spent last week in Boston and we dealt heavily with the folks at Daimler Truck and their Capital Market Day. Interestingly, and again, it's a quirk of schedule, but we have Roger Nielsen this week, who is the former CEO of Daimler Truck North America. We haven't talked to Roger in a while. It's going to be great to hear what he's been up to in retirement. And believe me, he's been busy. It is interesting, too, that, when he retired in 2021, he promised his wife that he would take 30 days before getting busy outside the house. We'll find out if he kept that pledge. But also, he has most recently been named the chairman at Proterra Incorporated. Now, those of you who watch the show know that we had Gareth Joyce, the CEO of Proterra, on a few weeks ago to talk about what's happening in the company. So we'll talk a little bit about Proterra, but they are in a quiet period right now. So, in advance of earnings. So we won't get too deep into that with Roger, but we will ask him about some of the work he's been doing with mobility startups. He's on the board of directors of 4 of them right now. But before we get to all of that, let's hit a few headlines here. Earlier today, we learned that Nikola, in fact, now has its share authorization path made to increase its number of shares to 1.6 billion from 800 million. This wasn't the shareholders who did it for them, but rather the governor of Delaware. He signed off on a legislative change there, a regulation change that will allow Nikola to begin to both authorize and then sell new shares. Now, of course, they have some debt to pay. They've got interest on a $200 million loan from a hedge fund, Antera Capital, that they need to pay for. They also have a truck, the fuel cell tray that goes into production this quarter. So they need the money. They now have a path to get it. And you've seen a tremendous run up in their stock price over the last month, almost 4 times what it was. So, maybe they're around for a while after all. We've got people out there who think they're going to go away, and they haven't done that. It's interesting, too, speaking of hanging around and actually doing better than that, Aurora Innovation is going to the capital markets now. They are going to sell $200 million worth of stock to the public, but they've also arranged a private placement worth $600 million to the company, all of which presumably will go to scale up their autonomous business. They have partnerships with PACCAR and with Volvo, and are targeting 2024 to begin driverless trucking commercialization, or some routes in Texas. And finally, Volvo and Westport Fuels are getting together in a joint venture. This is not a big venture, not really material to Volvo, but it's important for Westport because their last joint venture in the natural gas space ended with Cummins back in 2021. This new venture will focus both on the HPDI fuel system, which is intended to, it's a direct injection system for a number of fuels. They can do renewable natural gas, CNG, and LNG, and eventually probably hydrogen. We've been hearing a lot about hydrogen ICE fuel systems. So watch for that. Volvo has been using Westport's HPDI for about 5 years now. So there's a new venture aborting there. Okay, so let's bring in Roger Nielsen now. He's a veteran of Daimler Truck, 4 years plus as the CEO, and 16 years before that as the chief operating officer, and even the career itself dates back to the mid-'80s. Roger, welcome to Truck Tech. It is great to see you.
Thanks, Alan, and thank you for the invitation to join you today.
Well, it's great. I really appreciate the fact that we stayed in touch since you left Daimler back in 21, and not weekly or anything, but we are in touch with each other, so it's great. And I mentioned in the open that you had promised your wife that you'd give it 30 days before you went and did something else after you left Daimler back in April of 21. How'd you do on that promise?
I think I made it almost to day 29, but that siren song of trucking just kept me coming back and coming back. And, I left Daimler Truck at a time when we were doing the hive down from Mercedes. And it was such an exciting time with battery electric coming out, autonomous coming out. I had a hard time just giving that up and walking away from that.
Yeah, well, we know how busy you have been. I mean, I've actually probably written once or twice about some of the activities that you've taken on, and of course, the most recent one, and we'll get to this, is maybe your hopes and your thinking about Proterra. And I realize, as I also said, that there's not a lot we can talk about in terms of numbers, given that we're just before second quarter earnings. But we'll come back to that. I really love to talk about or start talking about your advisory work, and I can only imagine, honestly, and this, I mean this sincerely, that getting someone of your caliber in any capacity would be a win for a startup. And you've aligned with four of them, as best I can tell. You've got AI Fleet, GPR, Safe AI, and Nodar, all of that, and then of course Portera on top of it. What was appealing, Roger, about these particular companies?
Yeah, well, let's take the latter three, which are all in autonomous. And as we addressed autonomous and the business case behind autonomous trucking, we always running into that action, which is the trucks aren't smart enough yet. We don't have the right sensor stack. We don't have the basically the right intelligence and the right staff to put it together. And through my work with venture capital firms, I came across these three. Nodar, which is using stereo cameras to do long distance perception. They're seeing out 1,000 meters. A brick that's 4 inches tall. GPR, which is using ground penetrating radar to look down into the earth for the fingerprint of the subterranean materials to be able to figure out where it is. And the third one, Safe AI, which is using on highway technology off highway in mining and construction, an operating domain in which we can use the technology that we have today without, let's say, the restrictions that come with moving vehicles autonomously with the rest of the community that you find on highway. So that was appealing. Daimler did me a favor and said I had to stay out of on-highway trucking for 18 months. And so I said, hey, here's a chance to continue my passion with autonomous. And so these three companies actually came to me through some venture capital discussions. And I decided, hey, I'm going to invest my time and my energy and, in some cases, my money into seeing these companies bring their technology forward.
Well, you've got a director position in each of them, but I have to believe that more than just a sort of a passive director role, you're actually, sharing some of what you've learned over your career. I mean, that would be why I would want you around, certainly. What kind of things are you able to share with them? And are the messages common, or are they different enough businesses that they require sort of a customized advising?
Yeah, each of them are a little bit different. They're each at a different stage. Some are, just really at the startup stage doing Series A, and some are talking about doing Series C financing rounds. So, but for sure, each of them come with their challenges, which is how do you take a prototype from the garage and industrialize it? How do you get a customer to commit? And how do you survive that time between the commitment and series production? And with that then comes everything we've learned in over the years in Daimler, which is how do you run a company cost efficiently? How do you continue to motivate people through the ups and downs and so forth? So it's been fun working with these companies to prepare them to basically enter the big leagues.
Well, and you mentioned that Daimler did you a favor, as you put it, by keeping you away from on-highway trucking for 18 months. You didn't mention the AI fleet yet. Did that one sort of fall into that 18-month window there?
Yeah, actually, it fell right outside the window, but it's a trucking company. Okay, so I could have joined them from the very beginning. One of through the over the years, I made a lot of friends in the trucking business with all the big fleet owners and executives, and a few of them came to me as I was retiring and said, "Whatever you do, don't join the board of an old time trucking company. You'll get the offers." And sure enough, they came. People say, "Hey, would you like to join us on our board?" And he says, "You'll be bored to tears." He goes, "Find something. If you want to stay in trucking, find something that's exciting." And this is where AI Fleet came along. Small company, young startup, hardly had less than 10 trucks. And using technology, artificial intelligence, and machine learning, they've put together a whole transportation management stack to run their own trucking company more profitable with more miles and better driver retention than any company I've ever come in contact with.
Mhm. How is it that, and Daimler puts tremendous value on the customer relationship. You hear it from everybody that that you associate with a Daimler, and I know that was true of you. And I still remember, when you were picking country acts for the for your customer event. We kind of glad that John O'Leary's gone a different direction personally, but you did a great job with that. But those customer events, Roger, were so special because it was sort of not just a reward for them, but it was a way for you to get around and, I guess press the flesh and things like that in a non, business setting, right?
Exactly. No, the American Trucking Association, the customer appreciation event that we'd had on Monday night, started it went 1995 with Elton John. And it was a great
Hmm.
chance for trucking company executives to come together without the pressure of business. And for us, without the pressure of business. Sure enough, on the side, maybe we'll have business meetings and so forth, but it gave us a chance to meet the executives in a different environment, have a little bit of fun, show them we appreciated them, and give them something that maybe they otherwise wouldn't have access to.
Sure. Well, I understand that a lot of times the decision was based on perhaps what the spouses would want to hear as much as what the truckers would want to hear. Is there truth to that?
Absolutely. Absolutely. My wife was always involved in narrowing it down. I mean, you can tell she's a country western fan. So, but the
Right.
truth be told, Bon Jovi was on the top of my list for the next one. And
Well,
through all
there you
everything,
go.
John was able to pick them up for the last customer appreciation event. So, I
Well,
take a little bit of credit for that.
no, you realize last year was Billy Joel. I mean, that gets
It
back
was
into
Billy
that
Joel. It
whole.
was the year before it was Bon Jovi. Yeah.
That's right.
Yeah.
Yeah, in Nashville, and it's interesting. I'm not going to spend too much time here, but it's interesting that the guessing games go on and on and on, and nobody gets it right. It's such a small, closely held secret, but it
Yeah.
is one of the highlights of the ATA management event. I want to go back to autonomous, Roger, because you said that three of the companies that you're directing or being a director for and advising. I want to ask you a little bit about the overall ecosystem for autonomous trucking. We're seeing that inevitable shakeout now, but also at least a couple of companies that are getting past rough patches, notably Aurora Innovation, which I mentioned in the
Mhm.
headlines, and then of course Torque Robotics has Daimler Truck resources behind it, so you'd have to say it's at least somewhat insulated. But how surprised are you at what we've been seeing? The examples of embarked trucks sort of going away and too simple considering an exit from the U.S. market.
Yeah. What if you look at the common denominator with the companies that are still in the business, or let's call them looking towards success? They all have a partnership with a truck OEM. That full integration into the electronics of the vehicle is critical to having success. You can't reverse engineer your autonomous driving stack into an OEM who's giving you the palm and saying, "Hey, I don't want to cooperate." You just can't do it and make the truck operate properly or safely. And so Aurora, Torque, Waymo, Kodiak, to some extent, have these partnerships with the truck OEMs, and those that are have exited or looking to exit the market didn't have that partnership set up.
Mhm, mhm. Well, and it's interesting that it's private and it's active. The Kodiak is, and Don Burnett is a pretty sharp guy. He'll be with us actually next week on the show. There's one plug. I'll do more, Roger. I promise. But
He's a great guy.
but
He's a great
he is a great guy and really really smart. In fact, his wife might be smarter. She actually does the camera work at Apple. I don't know if you knew that, but
guy. I didn't know that.
anyway, she directs the camera that's in your phone. Anyway, I wanted to ask because Kodiak doesn't have a direct partnership, but they do have the sort of the first big order, if you will, from again, it's a startup in Loadsmith, but Brett Suma has a lot of background from his days at Knight, and he felt like that was the place to go. So you are starting to see an emergence of certain companies now, right?
Yeah. And I think at the end of the day, there's room in the market for all those. It's not the first mover takes it all. And I think you kind of see my former employer's approach with both Torque and Waymo going at it. The fleets at the end of the day are going to select. And will they select one? Will they select two? We're not sure yet. But for sure, we be like we've always had a opportunity to provide a customer a Cummins engine or a captive engine in the past, Caterpillar or whatever. They still want that choice. And I think you're going to see that same choices being made in the autonomous driving systems. And I think the battle is still to be won out there to see who's going to have the best, who's going to be first to market. But nonetheless, I think if you look out 10 years from now and pull out a crystal ball, I think you'll see 3 or 4 different stacks out there all being successful.
You have the two, or I should say you, Daimler has the two partners, the two companies, one that's an integrated subsidiary that you had a big hand in bringing on back in 2019
Mm-hmm.
in Torque. And then, of course, the deal with Waymo. And I think there was certainly on my part some confusion over what the difference was. But then, as you said, when you look at sort of how you do Detroit engines and Cummins engines and offer the choice to your customers, it makes more sense. I am curious, though, if you see as the integrated chassis gets farther and farther along, do you see that being offered really to sort of other companies? Call it Kodiak, I mean, if you want to, because they don't have a direct partnership. And they always point out to me, Roger, that look, it's not exclusive. There's not exclusivity in these things. Perhaps with Torque and Daimler there is, but I think from a acquisition standpoint, do you see these integrated chassis perhaps being made available sort of in the free market, if you will?
I would see it as the market moves and the customers come in and say, "Hey, this is my autonomous driving stack that I want to work with." I think you're going to see the pressure from the customers to say, "Hey, I would like to use stack A with a PACCAR truck," and PACCAR says, "We'll say yes," and like Daimler will probably say yes. But I think first we have to prove it out. But I think the day will come where that interchangeability will be there. The industry is leading or leaning towards a common operating system, with a lot of OEMs using Apex AI as their core operating system. I think you'll see that ability to interface different systems, different OEMs, electronic systems become much easier as we head into the next decade.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Do you, it's interesting that ZF, which was the original e-axle supplier on the first version of the e-Cascadia, and now I guess that's really kind of become a Mercedes-Benz product this time. But it's interesting that ZF is starting to talk about, read this, here's my second plug, in Friday's newsletter, that they're beginning to think that there's some slowdown in the autonomous level 4 autonomous space. Now, it's interesting that it was Plus of all people, which is really a level 2 autonomy supplier, that brought this to my attention. But ZF actually thinks that there is a bit of a slowdown. And part of the reason is because of the resource demand for electrification. We've got regulations driving that, whereas, maybe not so much on the autonomous side.
No, you're absolutely correct. I mean, the regulatory environment, especially in Europe, that is forcing zero emissions vehicles onto the road is a huge consumer of capital. And there's only so much capital. And now you just came off the Capital Market Day, and you know how Daimler's using their capital, including for share buybacks. At the end of the day, they will be out of business if they don't get zero emissions vehicles on the road. And they will, of course. But the costs to be able to do that, not only to do the development work, but to industrialize it, are definitely higher than when we first went into the program and set our strategy. So I think You're going to see these, say, optional programs like autonomous are going to have to take second priority.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Well, that makes a lot of sense. And it was interesting because I wasn't sort of going to take Plus's word for it. I thought I really should talk to ZF. And so I did. And they said, yeah, this is what's going on. So, this is what the customers say. This is what, they need to do. So let's talk for just a moment, to the extent that you can, about Proterra. You came on, I think, in June as the chairman, following, oh gosh, I'm not good with names without looking at them.
Yeah, Jack Allen.
Jack Allen, thank you. Jack's a good man. And I apologize, Jack. I should have remembered you. But you succeeded Jack in that role. You're quite familiar with Proterra. I believe that the Daimler investment in Proterra came on your watch.
Correct.
Tell me a little bit, if you can, about sort of the state of Proterra as you see it right now. Obviously, they're providing for Daimler the system for the Jouley bus and on a custom chassis MT50E. Had Gareth Joyce on the show a few weeks ago. He said the company, is in pretty good shape. But again, we're not going to talk about numbers, but I do want to ask you a little bit about first your impressions of what you've seen since you've sort of been in the chairman role, if you can share that.
Yeah, Proterra has this history as an electric city bus company. Started in 2004, FTA funding, put buses on the road in 2008. And then somewhere around 2016, 17, the interest came for their battery technology. So what you see is a company in this transition from being a city bus OEM to becoming a battery pack supplier to the commercial vehicle industry. That's a big cultural change. But you'll see that with this continuous growth we're having in supplying battery packs, I think we're almost up to 2,000 systems on the road today. That part of the business is becoming very dominant under the Proterra roof. City
Yeah,
bus
I
is a pretty
actually saw it.
small,
I
steady
had up there,
business.
and I know you've been there, right? I mean, but I had a chance to tour Proterra Powered One in Greer in South Carolina just a few weeks ago. Took an hour out from vacation and had an opportunity to go through it. And it looked to me like the mirrored production line seems to make a lot of sense. I mean, and again, I'm sure you've been there more than once. What's your take on how that's coming together?
Yeah, no, that's coming together great. And you see how we've been able to automate it, not only to get capacity up and production levels up, but also to take costs out of the system and increase definitely the level of quality that we put in the system. Uh, for example, the welds on the batteries that were once inspected by hand with tweezers are now automatically tested and so forth. So it's actually brought together a higher level of quality, higher level of output at a much lower per unit costs. With additional systems going in, allows us to provide different configurations of battery packs and so forth. I think we're up to 39 different battery pack configurations we're able to provide. So definitely we've introduced the flexibility onto those two lines that you saw down there to the greatest extent we could. And as you saw, half the facility is still empty. We have a lot of room to grow.
Yep, I did see that. I want to ask you then also, and you said you didn't want to get in the weeds, and I don't want to either, but I'm going to talk about battery chemistry for a minute here. Gareth told me that Proterra is committed to LMC battery chemistry
Right.
for now. But Proterra did invest in LFP, at least at some level. There's not a lot known about what you did there.
Yeah.
What is your sense of trucking use of LFP? And I know that other than the Proterra, Daimler was committed to what Cattle provided, and it is a leader in LFP technology, or lithium ion phosphate.
Yeah, going forward, you'll find Proterra will be agnostic to the chemistry. Okay, so this is I think we announced it in December that we have invested in a company that would provide LFP batteries to us. It's definitely one of those discussions we have with customers, but it really starts with, don't decide on chemistry, decide on what application you're trying to serve, and let us work with you to select the proper chemistry and battery pack for your application. And I think there's room in the marketplace for both NMC and LFP. As we get further into fuel cell powered EVs and so forth, we'll have to see how that plays out exactly. But at the moment, I really think there's room in the market for both. I think what's important right now in the North American market, and definitely driven from the national agenda, is this domestic production of batteries. And this is where
check that box, right? I mean,
Eric checks that box pretty strongly. And it's not only what we're concerned about, and this is, I guess, in all my startup work, we're also concerned about where does the IP originate from. You might be U.S. production, but are using foreign IP. And so this has also been a concern as we're going forward. And so we play strong cards there at Proterra to say, hey, this is battery technology, battery packs developed and produced here in America. And it gives us a head start on pushing the technology. But for sure, we believe to become a provider to wider, a broader segments of the market, we definitely need to provide LFP as well as NMC in our battery packs.
Sure. Well, Roger, we are, believe it or not, out of time already. I would go on another half hour with you, but we're not going to.
Oh my gosh.
I love this. I know. Isn't it amazing? We're about done here. But thank you so much for coming on Truck Talk. It's great to catch up with you. I look forward to staying in touch. And, maybe we'll do this again if the show lasts. Maybe we'll have you back on. But wish you all the best at Proterra and with the companies that you're advising. Thanks so much for being here.
Thanks, Alan. I appreciate the invitation.
Yeah. Okay, folks, next week, as we mentioned, I think I was full of plugs today, but next week, as we mentioned, we've got Don Burnett from Kodiak Robotics and Brett Suma from Loadsmith coming on the show to talk about their recent deal under which Loadsmith will get 800 Kodiak systems beginning in 2025. So we will look forward to talking with them, and we hope to see all of you next week here on Truck Tech. Thanks for joining.